Krishna, my dear devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're continuing uh, in the Bhagavad Gita introduction, and we'll continue now. This is in the introduction on my page 16. It might be a different page in your book. There are many examples given of how we are to utilize those things which are set aside for us by the Lord. This is also explained in Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning, Arjuna decided that he should not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. This was his own decision. Arjuna told the Lord that it was not possible for him to enjoy the kingdom after killing his own kinsman. This decision was based on the body, because he was thinking that the body was himself and that his bodily relations or expansions were his brothers, nephews, brothers-in-law, grandfathers, and so on. Therefore, he wanted to satisfy his bodily demands. Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord just to change this view. And at the end, Arjuna decides to fight under the directions of the Lord when he says, Karishye vachanam tava, I shall act according to your word. In this world, men are not meant for quarreling like cats and dogs. Men must be intelligent to realize the importance of human life and refuse to act like ordinary animals. A human being should realize the aim of his life, and this direction is given in all Vedic literatures, and the essence is given in Bhagavad Gita. Vedic literature is meant for human beings, not for animals. Animals can kill other living animals, and there is no question of a sin on the part. But if a man kills an animal for the satisfaction of his uncontrolled taste, he must be responsible for breaking the laws of nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly explained that there are three kinds of activities according to the different modes of nature. The activities of goodness, of passion, and of ignorance. Similarly, there are three kinds of eatables also. Eatables in goodness, passion, and ignorance. All of this is clearly described, and if we properly utilize the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, then our whole life will become purified. And ultimately, we'll be able to reach the destination which is beyond this material sky. Yad gatva na nivartante tadama paramam mama. That destination is called the Sanatana sky, the eternal spiritual sky. In this material world, we find that everything is temporary. It comes to being, stays for some time, produces some byproducts, meaning children, dwindles, and then vanishes. That is the law of the material world. Whether we use as an example this body or a piece of fruit or anything, but beyond this temporary world, there's another world of which we have information. That world consists of another nature, which is Sanatana, eternal. Jiva is also described as Sanatana, eternal. And the Lord is also described as Sanatana in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We have an intimate relationship with the Lord, and because we're all qualitatively one, the Sanatana Dhamma, or sky. Dhamma means the place in the spiritual world. The Sanatana Dhamma, or sky, the Sanatana Supreme Personality of, I'm sorry, the Sanatana Dharma, or sky, the Sanatana Supreme Personality, and the Sanatana living entities, the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to revive our Sanatana occupation, or Sanatana Dharma, which is the eternal occupation of the living entity. We are temporarily engaged in different activities, but all of these activities can be purified when we give up all these temporary activities and take up the activities which are prescribed by the Supreme Lord. That is called our pure life. The Supreme Lord and his transcendental abode are both Sanatana, meaning eternal, as are the living entities. And the combined association of the Supreme Lord and the living entities in the Sanatana abode is the perfection of human life. The Lord is very kind to the living entities because they are his sons. Lord Krishna declares in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvayonisu, Aham Bijapradapita. I am the father of all. Of course, there are all types of living entities according to their various karmas. But here the Lord claims that he's the father of all of them. Therefore, the Lord descends to reclaim all of his fallen, conditioned souls, to call them back to the Sanatana eternal sky, so that the Sanatana living entities may regain their eternal Sanatana positions. In eternal association with the Lord. The Lord comes himself in different incarnations, or he sends his confidential servants as sons, and he associates his associates or acharyas to reclaim the conditioned souls. Therefore, Sanatana Dharma does not refer to any sectarian process of religion. It is the eternal function of the eternal living entities in relationship with the eternal Supreme Lord. Sanatana Dharma refers, as stated previously, to the eternal occupation of the living entity. Sripada Ramanujacharya has explained the word Sanatana as that which has neither beginning nor end. So when we speak of Sanatana Dharma, we must take it for granted on the authority of Sripada Ramanujacharya that it has neither beginning nor end. The English word religion is a little different from Sanatana Dharma. Religion conveys the idea of faith, and faith may change. One may have faith in a particular process, he may change his faith and adopt another, but Sanatana Dharma refers to that activity which cannot be changed. For instance, liquidity cannot be taken from water, nor can heat be taken from fire. Similarly, the eternal function of the eternal living entity cannot be taken from the living entity. Sanatana Dharma is eternally integral with the living entity. When we speak of Sanatana Dharma, therefore, we must take it for granted on the authority of Sripada Ramanujacharya that it has neither beginning nor end. That which has neither beginning nor end, and that which has neither end or beginning, must not be sectarian, for it cannot be limited by any boundaries. Those belonging to some sectarian faith will wrongly consider that Sanatana Dharma is also sectarian, But if we go deeply into the matter and consider it in the light of modern science, it is possible for us to see that Sanatana Dharma is the business of all the people of the world, nay, of all the living entities of the universe. Non-Sanatana religious faith may have some beginning in the annals of human history, but there is no beginning to the history of Sanatana Dharma because it remains eternally with the living entity. Insofar as the living entities are concerned, the authoritative Shastras state that the living entity has neither birth nor death. In the Gita, it is stated that the living entity is never born and he never dies. He is eternal and indestructible, and he continues to live after the destruction of his temporary material body. So let's talk about what he's saying here. When he says Sanatana Dharma, the word Sanatana means eternal, and Dharma means your occupational duty in life. So what is your eternal occupational duty? It's to serve the Lord with love and devotion. So now we know what we're talking about. Those belonging to some sectarian faith will wrongly consider that Sanatana Dharma is also sectarian. But if we go deeply into the matter and consider it in the light of modern science, it is possible for us to see that Sanatana Dharma is the business of all the people of the world, nay, of all the living entities of the universe. Non-Sanatana religious faith may have some beginning in the annals of human history, but there is no beginning to the history of Sanatana Dharma because it remains eternally with the living entities. Insofar as the living entities are concerned, the authoritative Shastras state that the living entity has neither birth nor death. In the Gita, it is stated that the living entity is never born and he never dies. He is eternal and indestructible, and he continues to live after the destruction of his temporary material body. So let's talk about that for a minute. When it says living entity has neither birth nor death. Well, if you talk about the body has birth and death, but the soul has no birth and death. That's why he's saying it. You don't want to get confused here. So when he says it doesn't have any birth and doesn't have any death, it's talking about the soul. Whereas the body has a birth and death. So then it says, those belonging to some sectarian faith will wrongly consider that Sanatana Dharma is also sectarian. But if we go deeply into the matter and consider it in the light of modern science, it is possible for us to see that Sanatana Dharma is the business of all the people of the world, nay, of all the living entities of the universe. Non-Sanatana religious faith may have some beginning in the annals of human history, but there is no beginning to the history of Sanatana Dharma because it remains eternally with the living entities. Insofar as the living entities are concerned, the authoritative Shastras state that the living entity has neither birth nor death. In the Gita, it is stated that the living entity is never born and he never dies. He is eternal and indestructible. He is eternal and indestructible, and he continues to live after the destruction of his temporary material body. In reference to the concept of Sanatana Dharma, we must try to understand the concept of religion from the Sanskrit root meaning of the word dharma. Dharma refers to that which is constantly existing with a particular object. we conclude that there is heat and light along with the fire. Without heat and light, there's no meaning to the word fire. Similarly, we must discover the essential part of the living being, that part which is his constant companion. That constant companion is his eternal quality, and that eternal quality is his eternal religion. What's that? It's devotional service. When Sanatana Goswami asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the swarupa of every living being, the Lord replied that the swarupa, or constitutional position of the living being, is the rendering of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the swarupa, the constitutional position of the living being. We're meant, because we come from Krishna, and we're part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, our real duty in life is to serve Krishna. That's our, what you would call, swarup, our constitutional position. Well, constitutional, let's say when it says constitutional position, it means that this is what we're meant to be, and this is who we actually are. We are the eternal servants of Krishna. Any other statement will be wrong. That this statement is correct. We are meant to eternal, by constitutional, meaning it's absolutely, let's say, cannot be changed. Let's put it like that. You can try and change it, but you'll always be serving somebody. If you're not serving Krishna, you'll end up serving a dog, or you serve a cat, or you serve your country, or you serve your wife or your husband. We're all meant to serve. That's our constitutional position. You can't change it. You may try to change it, but you'll end up serving something all the time.
Constitutional means relating to an established set of principles.
Okay, look at the second definition.
Relating to someone's physical or mental condition.
Any third definition? Basically, it means what you're meant to be. You can't, let's say, stop being.
The composition of something.
Yeah.
Authorized, permitted, sanctioned. It's also constitution.
What we're meant to be. Similarly, we must discover the essential part of the living being, that part which is his constant companion. That constant companion is his eternal quality, and that eternal quality is his eternal religion. When Sanatana Goswami asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the swarupa of every living being, the Lord replied that the swarupa, or constitutional position of the living being, is the rendering of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, why did he say that? Because we are all part and parcel of the Lord. That means that we have all come from Krishna originally. Therefore, we are meant to serve Krishna as that's our constitutional position. That's who we are. If we decide not to do it, we're in a state of illusion and we'll never really achieve the purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? It's to free ourselves from this cycle of birth and death and go back to Godhead, or go back to Lord Krishna and continue the eternal transcendental pastimes with the Lord. Now, in the material world, we also have pastimes, but they're not eternal, one, and they're mostly gross things, going to parties, drinking champagne, engaging in sex, and so forth. So there's activities in the material world, but there are activities also in the spiritual world. It's not static. You know what's interesting? Socrates and Plato, they thought that the spiritual world was static. Why should you look that up?
I think Plato particularly.
They thought that the forms of beings in the spiritual world were static, and they were eternally in the perfect, let's say, state. But they were not. There was no, activity. It's interesting how even the smartest people in the world, without having a bona fide guru, like Socrates and Plato, they were both very, very smart people, but they still made mistakes. What did it say? I'll continue when you find it. You can stop me. When Sanatana Goswami asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the swarupa of the living entity, of the swarupa of every living being, the Lord replied that the swarupa or constitutional position of the living being is the rendering of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we analyze this statement of Lord Chaitanya's, we can easily see that every living being is constantly engaged in rendering service to another living being. A living being serves living being serves other living beings in various capacities. By doing so, the living entity enjoys life. The lower animals serve human beings as servants serve their master. A serves B, master. B serves C, master. And C serves D, master, and so on. Under these circumstances, we can see that one friend serves another friend. The mother serves the son. The wife serves the husband serves the wife, and so on. If we go on searching in the spirit, it will be seen that there is no exception in the society of living beings to the activity of service. Did you find it?
Yeah, so according to Socrates, Maharaj, our bodies belong to the physical realm. They change, they are imperfect, they die. Our souls, however, belong to the ideal realm. They are unchanging and immortal, surviving the death of the realm.
Yeah.
Unchanging.
Yeah, no, but basically what he means is that they're static. They're perfect, but they're static. There's no
This is the Plato's theory of forms.
Yeah.
In his theory of forms, Plato asserts that the universe is divided between a physical and spiritual realm. The physical world where humans reside is composed of both objects and shadows and images. The spiritual world, on the other hand, contains the forms and ideals for anything an individual could do or make within the physical world as a human being. In many ways, this realm represents the modern version of heaven to Plato. The forms that existed within the spiritual world, according to Plato, served as blueprints and plans for objects upon earth. He believed that each form was perfect, unchanging, and had always existed in the universe. This perfection, however, was strictly limited to the spiritual realm, as Plato believed that nothing perfect existed within the physical universe. Rather, he believed that objects that existed on earth were imperfect versions of the forms that exist in the spiritual realm. An example of this can be seen with the notion of coffee and pizza. According to Plato's theory, the spiritual world contains perfect forms for both these objects that cannot be replicated on earth.
Cannot be what?
Replicated on earth.
Replicated what?
On earth.
On earth.
Yeah, on earth.
You're
As
mispronouncing.
earth. As humans, we can make coffee and pizza that both taste great. However, according to this theory, they can never be perfected. They are mere shadows of their perfect forms in the spiritual world. The allegory of cave. I mean, in a way, what he summarized is what the 15th chapter also says, right, Maharaj? Like, there is the material world is an imperfect reflection of the spiritual world.
No, but he's implying that the spiritual world is static. It's not animated. You're perfect because you're not moving. I mean, just let's see if that's true.
So the allegory of cave, that's the next one. Plato uses the allegory of cave as a means of explaining his theory. In his story, Plato describes several individuals that have been imprisoned within a cave since childhood, with their necks and legs fettered in a manner that prevents them from turning their heads around. These prisoners, in turn, are forced to gaze upon the wall of the cave, which is illuminated by a fire behind them. Plato then states that puppeteers in front of the fire project shadows of various artifacts onto the wall in front of the prisoners. In doing so, Plato states that the prisoners come to believe over time that the truth is nothing other than the shadows of these artifacts. Plato then describes what would happen if one of the prisoners was allowed to leave the cave and venture outside. By leaving, Plato states that the individual learns of the reality that exists beyond the shadows of the truth evident within the cave. Once the former prisoner is allowed to view the sun outside, Plato states that he would infer and conclude that the sun provides the seasons and years, governs everything in the visible world, and is in some ways the cause of all things that he used to see. Here, Plato introduces his readers to what he considered to be the form of goodness represented by the sun, which he feels is the most important of all forms since it gives life, illuminates everything within the physical world. Plato concludes his theory by describing what would happen when the former prisoner returns to the cave. Plato states that upon his return, his ability to recognize the shadows upon the cave's wall in an enlightened manner would invite ridicule from the prisoners besides him. Because the prisoners that remained inside the cave were not able to venture outside, Plato concludes that they would be incapable of understanding anything the other prisoner attempted to explain to them. In Plato's theory, the prisoner that ventures outside the cave represents the philosopher king and the guardians of his ideal republic. The individuals that remain inside the cave are the representative of the humanity, the craftspeople and auxiliaries.
What?
He has auxiliaries and craftspeople. So he has this three classes of people that, there is the philosopher king, craftspeople, and the auxiliaries. Somewhat like our Chaturvarnam, but not fully. By going outside the cave, the philosopher king gains valuable insight into the true forms of the objects and what constitutes goodness. According to Plato, however, those who remain within the cave are incapable of understanding the concept of reality outside of the physical world. Thus, they are incapable of understanding the forms. Instead, Plato believed that regular individuals, such as the craftspeople, were mere sightseers of the truth. According to him, these individuals were incapable of seeing the forms and instead only saw reflections of truth within the physical world. Like individuals within the cave, the craftspeople and auxiliaries of the Plato's society accepted shadows as reality.
So did you find
This that
the spirit, according to Plato, Socrates, spiritual is perfect but static.
Socrates mainly believed in knowledge. Yes.
Go?
Socrates.
Yeah.
Shamsundra Das Prabhu said, generally speaking, Socrates was more concerned with God as a moral reality than as a personal conception.
You're saying?
Shamsundra Prabhu.
He texted?
Yeah. It's from the book. No, not our Shamsundra Prabhu. This is Prabhupada's disciple.
Oh, okay. He's talking to Prabhupada.
Yeah.
He explained to him what the Greeks believed, and Prabhupada is answering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For Socrates, reality is dualistic, made up of two dichotomous realms. One realm is changeable, transient, and imperfect, whereas the other realm is unchanging, eternal, immortal. Unchanging. He's using the word unchanging. Not static.
But doesn't mean it's static.
The physical world in which we live, comprising all that we can see, hear, taste, smell, and feel, belongs to the former realm.
Okay.
I mean, he may have gotten, I mean, he may have read the Vedas and he may have interpreted.
Oh no, they definitely were influenced by it.
Yeah, because this
But
is.
they put their own twist to it.
Mhm.
They were definitely, I mean, there was always connection between Greece and India.
Correct.
Mhm.
We say it's unchanging, eternal, immortal. We use the word unchanging, we don't use the word static.
Mhm.
I mean, in a way, that's what spiritual
No, it's
is. Because, like the soul, for example, the soul is. I mean, there is rasas that are.
But he's not mentioning soul.
For Socrates, reality is dualistic, made up of two dichotomous realms. One realm is changeable, transient, and imperfect, whereas the other realm is unchanging, eternal, immortal.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Immortal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate anymore, so let's leave it at that. Unless somebody can do more research, but, okay, so. So the Swarupa is service. The living entity is meant to serve who? They're meant to serve God. But if they don't serve God, they'll serve something else. But they can't stop serving.
Yes. Last time check wise.
Can't stop.
It's 7:35.
Yeah. Are there any questions?
So this Plato thing is definitely interesting because at least I mean, definitely he wouldn't have gotten by himself.
Socrates both were impersonal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they believe that the spiritual world has these forms and they're perfect. And everything we see in the material world, they're imperfect, facsimiles of those perfect forms in the spiritual. But that implies, in my thinking, that implies that the forms in the spiritual are static. If they start moving around, they could actually lose their perfection in some way. But anyway, I don't want to. That's okay. That's my speculation.
So I just. Oh, you have something to put? Socrates gives an analogy of humanity living within a dark cave. Yeah, that's the allegory of cave. That's the one that I just.
Yeah.
But I think I just want to read a little bit more, Maharaj, because this
Yeah,
can probably connect some of that. He said, like, in this case, the religious and metaphysical components of Plato's theory. The Plato's theory also contained both religious and metaphysical components that serve to explain humanity's existence and offer hope for a life after death.
Mhm.
Plato explains his vision of the afterlife in great detail through the myth of
Myth of what?
Er.
Er.
That's the apparently the Greek soldier. According to Plato, was a Greek soldier that died while on the battlefield. Following his death, Er's soul was allowed to visit the spiritual realm. Upon viewing the various aspects of the afterlife, however, Er's soul was allowed to return to his body within the material physical world so that he could give an account of what he had seen. Plato states, when himself came forward, they, means the judges in the spiritual realm, told him that he was to be a messenger to human beings about the things that were there, and that he was to listen to and look at everything in the place. In a sense, this notion seems largely similar to the Christian example of Apostle Paul in the New Testament, who had a vision of the heaven and was allowed by God to give an account of what he had seen. Through the myth of Plato describes the afterlife in a fashion that greatly resembles the modern Buddhist and Hindu models of reincarnation. Before an individual's soul was reborn into a new body, the soul is given an opportunity to view the various forms present within the spiritual realm. Then the individual is given a choice in choosing the next life. This is little, yeah, this is all. Once chosen, the soul travels to what Plato describes as the plane of forgetfulness, where various individuals drink from the river that wipes their minds clean of any memory of the forms. The material Maya.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, that's the false ego. Suddenly, Maya puts them in the covering. Plato states, all of them had to drink a certain measure of this water, but those who weren't saved by reason drank more than that, and as each of them drank, he forgot everything and went to sleep. Afterwards, the soul is placed into the new body and then returns to the physical world. Plato believed, however, that an individual's memory of the forms still existed within their subconscious, even after their mind has been erased. Through the dialectic, individuals such as guardians and the philosopher king could recall the various forms of the spiritual world that they had viewed prior to their present life. Revolutionary for its time. Now he's giving some opinion, this guy. In my opinion, Plato's theory of forms seems highly logical for the time period in which he lived. During this time, the gods and goddesses of Greek mythology were proving to be an inadequate means of explaining humanity's existence upon Earth and its origins. In addition, Greek mythology did not adequately address the notion of an afterlife that was satisfying enough for humans. Plato's theory, in turn, accounted for multiple aspects of humanity and introduced a concept of afterlife that rewarded those who were good and punished those individuals that were guilty of wrongdoings. In a sense, Plato's theory offered people a feeling that they had control over their destiny. As Plato proclaims in the Republic, there is a satisfying life rather than a bad one available, provided that he chooses it rationally and lives it seriously. More importantly, however, Plato's theory seems logical for this particular time period since it addressed the growing debate between relativity and absolutes. Sophists believe that the concepts such as beauty, truth, and justice were relative to various individuals and societies. Philosophers such as Socrates and Plato, however, believed that each of these concepts was absolute and was not relative to particular individuals and society. Rather, Plato believed that the only form of beauty, truth, and justice existed. Only one form of beauty, truth, and justice existed within the universe. By applying his theory of forms, therefore, it appears as though Plato was seeking a means of explaining his stance towards absolutes in a more detailed manner than before. In conclusion, Plato's theory was far from perfect and contained numerous concepts that were unclear, questionable. Even Aristotle, Plato's great student, objected to many of the elements within Plato's theory. Nevertheless, Plato's theory of the forms was a revolutionary concept for its time period. In turn, the introduction of Plato's theory played a tremendous role in inspiring future thinkers, religious individuals, and groups for many years that followed. So that's kind of.
Okay, so let's see. Is Plato saying that these forms, they're saying that these forms are perfect?
There's an ideal form that exists.
So is that form a living thing that's moving, or is it static?
It's there's no exact explanation of that, but in a way, there must be some movement also there, right, Maharaj? Because let's say if
there's movement, that can change the form.
I mean,
Those forms have to be immortal, but if they're moving around, things get hurt by moving around, or they deteriorate.
I mean, that's the one it says it's immortal. So how do we explain our spiritual world where it's also eternal, but it's also growing, that there is a dynamism to Krishna's. So there is
nobody gets old in Krishna consciousness, like general existence. Nobody gets old.
Correct, but at the same time
There's no decay.
But at the same time, if they wanted to experience, what it is to serve the Lord, like as a father and so on, there is that relationship, right? So that means like there is concept of whatever, in the sense like it's eternal, but they could also visualize and create an ideal form of a relationship. Is that true? Or like rasa has to be spirit.
We don't want to mix up the two, Krishna conscious understanding and Plato's understanding. I'm just trying to understand what Plato is saying when there's and Socrates also, there are these perfect forms. Obviously, they must be eternal.
That's what he says. Yeah, they're eternal.
But are they moving? Are they perfect human beings, or are they like statues?
They are mainly referring to voidism. They are not talking about any person. No, so let's see if we go back here, Maharaj, just this part, because see the form
is something, it's something that you can see and you can measure and so forth. But do they move? Are they living? Or are they static?
I didn't hear the word static anywhere.
Well, these perfect forms,
Hmm.
are they human beings?
No, they're not saying, they're just saying absolute truth. Absolute truth, that is not a living entity.
Okay, so then it's not human.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yes.
They don't change. They stay like the statue. Then.
Not even a statue, it's a concept. It's basically a conceptual, ideal concepts, like forms. And
But can you see them?
yeah, I think so. You get to see them. So the example given is you go into the second world,
Yeah.
and then you are given an option to see all the perfect forms.
Yeah.
And then you are again sent back to this world. So again, the analogy is there is the actual puppet, and then there is the projected puppet on the wall. The projected puppet is not the real puppet, the real image. So now only the person who's seen that actually has the memory of it in their subconscious thing. This deep spirit, in the subconscious idea. That's the philosopher king, means the king that has kind of seen the reality and then comes back. And
So is the reality that these perfect forms are these forms static or are they moving?
forms,
Walking, talking, etc.
I mean, the way it is said is like everything that we make a decision of in this life, we're trying to make something close to the near perfect. This is split. What does it say? The senses, this one? Yeah. Yeah, the senses perceive the changing phenomenal world, but according to Plato, the noumenal world is perceived by the mind. It is this world that is absolute, ideal, permanent, and universal. Would you say that the ultimate reality is ideal in this Platonic sense? Not ideal, factual. Param Satyam Dhimahi. We offer our obeisances to the absolute truth. This relative world, this is Srila Prabhupada answering now. This relative world is a perverted reflection of the absolute world. It is just like a shadow. The tree reflected in water may appear to be exactly like the tree itself, but it is a perverted reflection. The actual tree is there. Similarly, this relative world is a reflection of the absolute world. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is clearly stated that this manifested creation, which is but a reflection, has its beginning in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janmadi Yasyata. That one. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth. So let's see here. Plato considered the material world restricted to limitations of time and space, but the spiritual world transcends both. Srila Prabhupada, yes, I agree with us. He also believed that the time began with the creation of the material world. How does this relate to the Vedic version? Srila Prabhupada, time is eternal. The past, present, and future.
Yeah, that they got wrong.
Hmm.
They mean the Greek philosophers.
I mean,
Time doesn't have a beginning or end.
but isn't this also where, like, at the time Mahavishnu glances is when the time element is introduced, Maharaj, into the material world? I mean, it is a long time, but isn't that also when, like, when the
Time
creation?
is eternal.
Hmm.
Doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end.
Yeah, that's what Prabhupada says. Time itself is eternal.
Yeah.
The
Right.
relative according to the person, past, present, and future are relative according to the
In
body.
spiritual world, there is no time. That's what.
It's-
No, there is time,
But we don't feel it.
but you don't see it changing.
Yeah. In Brahma Samhita, it is saying Nahi Yatra hi Samaya. Means there is no time. Brahma Samhita ends with that line.
Well, in the material world, you experience time
by its
by
past.
passage.
Mm.
In the spiritual world, you experience time by its non-passage.
Mm.
But it's eternal. Both
Yeah.
realms, it's eternal. I'm still not sure about this form. So are these forms something that you only perceive in your mind? Or they're actual things like a statue that you can, look at and maybe even touch?
No, they are not saying it. It's only a idea.
Only an idea.
Yeah.
But how can it be perfect if you are perceiving it with your imperfect eyes and imperfect mind and everything?
They believe there is an absolute truth which is all good. So humans need to go to that state of goodness. Then he is liberated.
Then what?
Then he is liberated, or it's like that. It's a kind of state of mind or something. It's not a form or statue.
Is that what you have read there, or is that something you explained?
It's in the so this Shyam Sundar Das Prabhu was interviewing Srila Prabhupada
Yeah.
on the so he is saying all the philosophical points of Plato and Socrates. So in that he is not referring to any form or spiritual world. There, Socrates and Plato, they were mainly talking about the absolute truth. Absolute truth is goodness for them. Everything is perfect, ethical, morality, all those things.
Well, read what he said. Read the question Shamsuna is asking and see what Prabhupada's answers.
Um, Harivilas Das is saying, according to Socrates, the real pursuit of man is a search for the absolute good. Basically, Socrates is impersonalist because he does not.
Is that Prabhupada now?
No, Harivilas Das.
Yeah.
Basically, Socrates is an impersonalist because he does not ultimately define the absolute good.
He
As a-
doesn't what?
He does not ultimately,
He does not what?
he does not ultimately define
Ultimately define.
Define
the absolute good as a person, nor does he give it a personal name.
A personal name.
Yeah. He did not define it as a person or did not give a personal name.
Of this perfect form.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So Srila Prabhupada is answering, oh, that is a preliminary stage of understanding the absolute, known as Brahman realization. Realization of the impersonal feature. When one is further advanced, he attains Paramatma realization, realization of the localized feature, whereby he realizes that God is everywhere. It is a fact that God is everywhere, but at the same time, God has his own abode. Gologa eva nivasti agilatma bhuda. God is a person and he has his own abode and associates. Although he is in his abode, he is present everywhere, within every atom. Andandarastha Paramanu Chayandarastha. Like other impersonalists, Socrates cannot understand how God, through his potency, can remain in his own abode and simultaneously be present in every atom. That's what Srila Prabhupada is. Then Harivilas saying, the good of which Socrates speaks is different from Sattva Guna. In Republic, Socrates says that it is a good which gives truth to objects of knowledge and the very power of knowing to him who knows them. It's very complex. He speaks of form of essential goodness as the cause of knowledge and truth. The goodness which Socrates was saying is not the Sattva-guna in Bhagavad Gita. It's something different.
Prabhupada?
No, I agree with this.
How does he know?
Is asking Prabhupada to clarify?
Yeah.
So what does Prabhupada respond?
Prabhupada is saying Sattva-guna, the mode of goodness, is a position from which we can receive knowledge. Knowledge cannot be perceived from the platform of passion and ignorance. If we hear about Krishna or God, we are gradually freed from the clutches of darkness and passion. Then we can come to the platform of Sattva-guna. And when we are perfectly situated there, we are beyond the lower modes.
But Prabhupada must be explaining Shuddha Sattva also, right?
Yeah, he's explaining of that. Socrates taught a process of liberation comparable to that of Dhyana Yoga. For him, liberation meant freedom from passion, and he approved the saying, Gnoti Sueton, know thyself. By knowing ourselves through meditation or insight, we can gain self-control, and by being self-controlled, we can attain happiness. Srila Prabhupada is saying, yes, that is a fact. Meditation means analyzing the self and searching for absolute truth. That is described in Vedic literature.
Just wanted to anybody on the line, like any questions, comments, thoughts? I know it's longer than planned, but if not, then we'll end the session there for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna. We'll see you again in the morning.